Awesome. Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
All right, I should be able to see my screen now. I'd like to thank you guys for coming out for our second webcast on meeting the new Windows Azure. Today we're going to be going over Windows Azure Web Sites. Just a little bit about me. My name is, like Amy mentioned, Michael Collier. I'm the Windows Azure National Architect for Neudesic, and I'm also a Windows Azure MVP. If you want to get a hold of me, all my contact information is here on your screen. You can definitely feel free to email me, follow me on Twitter, or check out my blog at michaelscollier.com. It's pretty much a Windows Azure focused blog. So one thing I want to go over real quick with you guys is kind of set the stage for the Windows Azure. It was kind of a relaunch, so to speak, in early June. Microsoft had a pretty large event in San Francisco where they came there to kind of show off some of the new Windows Azure features, and that's what we're going to be talking about over this webcast series. Last month we talked about the new Windows Azure preview portal, the new HTML-based portal. Today it's going to be Windows Azure Web Sites. Over the next several months we'll be covering Windows Azure virtual machines, and then also wrapping up with Windows Azure Cloud Services. So if you want to go ahead and register for those webcasts, you can do that at neudesic.com. Go to our About page, and you'll be able to find the webcast on there. So we'll have two webcasts coming up in September and October on virtual machines. One in September will be covering the Windows virtual machines, and then you can also run Linux systems in Windows Azure as well now on the virtual machines. We'll cover those in October. So let's talk about Windows Azure Web Sites. The idea here with Windows Azure Web Sites is to really get you going quickly with Windows Azure. If you've worked with Windows Azure web roles in the past, you notice that getting a new web role started in Windows Azure was a 10 to 15 minute operation. There was quite a few things that Windows Azure had to do to get a web role up and running. Web roles are a little more advanced in some ways than what we'll see today in Windows Azure Web Sites. So the idea here with websites is to allow you to create a website yourself. Maybe you have a PHP site or Node.js site. Create one yourself very quickly. Or you can even pick one from the Windows Azure gallery. We'll see a quick example on how to do that as well. I can use a multitude of languages with Windows Azure Web Sites. So right now in the preview, the languages supported are Classic ASP, ASP.NET, PHP, and Node.js. And I can do all my development with these languages on Windows, but I can also do it on Linux systems or OS X as well. There's command line tools that Microsoft has made available, really nice ones. There's PowerShell for Windows, and there's command line tools based on Node.js that are kind of cross-platform that work with Windows, OS X, and Linux. So you have a lot of choice on the languages and the platform you want to develop your applications on. And one of the really nice things I think about websites with Windows Azure is how fast I can deploy my solutions. I can get out there, once I create my application, I can deploy it in a matter of seconds. And I have a wide range of options. If I like to use WebDeploy, and I can go ahead and do WebDeploy, and we'll see that today in an example. If I'm an organization that wants to update my website using FTP, because that's my publishing mechanism of choice, I can use FTP. I can also use Git. A lot of people like to use Git for that continuous deployment type of solutions, and you can certainly do that with Windows Azure as well. And also Team Foundation Service has a continuous deployment model as well now with Windows Azure Web Sites. So lots of options on choice for platform and deployment operations as well. There's a nice monitoring dashboard that you can go in to kind of see how your application is performing, what the usage statistics are for that website. So then you can make some sort of intelligent decisions about how you want to scale your application. Do I want to scale out, or do I want to scale out and up? And we'll cover all of these things today. So let's go ahead and do a very quick rate just to show you how quickly you can go ahead and get started with Windows Azure Web Sites. So we'll switch out of PowerPoint here, and one of the things I want to go to is our Windows Azure Management Portal. And if you're not familiar with the Windows Azure Management Portal, one of the things you're going to need to do with websites is to go ahead and activate Windows Azure Web Sites. They're not available by default. So I'm going to go ahead in here. We need to go to Account and click on the account, and so I'm going to keep everything up so we can quickly bounce back and forth. Go to my account section. I need to log in with my Windows Live ID. What we're doing here is going to go ahead and basically provision my Windows Azure preview features, Windows Azure Web Sites, Windows Azure Virtual Machines, and Windows Azure Media Services. So you can see I've already activated all these on my subscription, but if you haven't activated them on yours, you'll need to go in and there'll be a sign up button you'll need to click to get Windows Azure websites into your management portal. It shouldn't take very long. They move pretty quickly on getting the people provisioned, but something you'll need to go ahead and do. Once you've done that and you've been provisioned with Windows Azure websites, you'll see websites appearing in the left-hand navigation menu of your portal. Let's just go ahead and quickly create a new website. So you see we click the application bar that's part of the new HTML portal. I'm going to do website, and I'm just going to do quick create. And we're going to call this one New Web 1. We're going to then pick a subscription. You see that we get a little green checkbox here that the website is available, that domain name is available, and we're just going to create that website. You see at the bottom here, the portal is informing us that it's working on creating that website in the U.S. Eastern region, and that it is now being created. So if I want, I can just go ahead and click this link here in the URL tab. You see there's a little newweb1.azurewebsites.net. That's going to open up the kind of starting page for Windows Azure website. So that's, my website has been provisioned, it's created, it's ready to go for me, and all I have to do now is add content, my own customized content into the application. I get a default kind of starter page, a holding page to show you that the website is there and created. And then if I want to learn more about how to go about using this website, I can click the Tell Me More link as well. So I think it shows is really how quickly I can get up with the website. Let's talk about the different types of websites. You have the shared website and reserved websites. Shared websites is the default setup you get when you create a Windows Azure website, and you get 10 free websites for a year. And this even applies if you have a Windows Azure 90-day trial. You just sign up today, want to do a 90-day trial, and then after your 90 days, if you decide you no longer want to continue using Windows Azure, your website will be persisted at least for another 12 months if you so choose to. So it gives you a way that you could try out some of the other platform features, but you still want to keep your website up and running. You can go ahead and do that. One of the important things to know about shared websites is you're kind of a smaller fish in a bigger pool of people. This is a shared multi-tenant resources that you have there. So you may notice because of the multi-tenant nature of it, there's going to be some quota limits that are going to be involved with the shared websites. And we'll see more on the quota limits coming up here. Those are monthly limits that you have. Because of the multi-tenant nature, they really want to make sure that everybody has an enjoyable experience with the websites. If I do need to scale, I can scale out. So I have more instances of my website. If I need to scale up, I would need to go to reserved instances, which we'll see coming up here in a bit. One of the things you may notice with the shared websites is because it is currently in a preview mode, there is no SSL certificate support today with that. That might be something that Microsoft adds later, but no guarantees on how that's going to actually work as well. And one of the things over the course of the preview that Microsoft received a lot of feedback on is people wanted to have a custom domain name. And right now, custom domain names are a feature of the reserved instances. Microsoft has announced that they will have custom domain name support for shared websites coming when Windows Azure Websites is generally available, and they've announced a price for that. So you're going to pay 2 cents per hour per website to have custom domain name support on the shared websites. So not too bad on there, given it's a very cheap pricing model for shared websites to add a couple of features, probably namely domain names that people have been asking for. So if I need to scale out, I can go into the scale section with Windows Azure Websites, and there'll be a little test slider bar you see there. It starts out at 1. If I want to, I can easily scale it up to 2 or 3 instances. I have 1, 2, or 3 is the number of instances I can have for a Windows Azure shared website. Slide the bar over to the number of instances you want, click Save, and your website gets provisioned out on another instance as well. So it kind of helps you give you that scale out model very easily with websites. We talked about the quota limits that there is with shared websites because it's a multi-tenant solution. And these are some of those limits you have there. You can get 10 websites as part of the shared websites. You get those for free for a year. You have 165 megs of outbound data transfer. And just like all Windows Azure, inbound data transfer is free. You get a 20 megabyte My SQL database to give you a relational database. If you want to use a SQL database, it's like a Azure SQL database, you can certainly do that. You pay for that pricing for a SQL database. The interesting thing here is My SQL database as part of the shared websites is provided by a Microsoft partner called ClearDB. So they're setting that up on behalf of Microsoft. And you get 1 gig of storage with your website as well. When you go into the management portal for the website, you'll see this little usage overview chart there that's fairly real time. There's a little bit of a delay to it, but you kind of see there what your usage is for your website. So you can see how much storage you're using, how close you are to your quota limit there, number of hours for your CPU, data transfer, memory usage. You can kind of see a little bit about what you're using and know if you're getting closer to your limits for the shared instances. So then we have reserved instances. And the nice thing about reserved is it allows you to kind of remove some of those limitations that these shared instances have. For instance, I'm now the only person using my website. So I'm a single tenant. It's just me on there. I have basically exclusive access to that virtual machine. And the nice thing with shared websites, or one of the things with reserved, is that I can actually scale to larger machines. So with shared, I could just have more instances of a website. With reserves, I can have larger and more instances. So I can start off with a small, a medium, or a large instance, and then I can have 1, 2, or 3 of those as well. So I can kind of adjust how I want my performance and scalability to work with a little more flexibility with the reserved websites. Because I am the only person in this virtual machine, I take away those quota limits as far as data transfer, memory, that sort of stuff. But you do have a different pricing model. It's a pay-by-the-hour pricing model. And you also have, like, shared websites, there is no SSL support yet, but you do get custom domain name support as part of reserved websites. So you can see some of the different features that the two instances have and the pricing model that goes along with that. So if I need to scale out, I can certainly do that by sliding that same slider bar over, to be 1, 2, or 3 instances, and then picking what size of virtual machine I want from that drop-down box. Like I said, you have a lot of those quota limits are removed with the reserved instances, which is nice. I can have up to 100 websites now with the reserved instance. So I can actually have, I can scale out to number of websites is nice. And then my data transfers is pretty much unlimited. I can use as much as I want. There's no quota enforcement there. I just pay the standard Windows Azure pay-as-you-go consumption pricing for that. There is still a storage limit, so I'm not going to have unlimited storage on the file system. We'll talk more about how that file system works coming up. I do get 10 gigs of storage with my websites. You can see here we have pretty much the standard Windows Azure sizing for the virtual machines, except I don't have the extra small and extra large. I just have small, medium, and large. And during preview, there is a 33% discount on that pricing. So for a medium instance, instead of 24 cents an hour like you would have for a normal Windows Azure web role, I have a 16 cents an hour during preview pricing. And then once they go to GA, you'll pay the normal 12, 24, 48 cents for Windows Azure pricing. So let's go ahead and maybe take that Windows Azure website we just created, and let's go ahead and deploy a solution out there just to kind of show the deployment model we have with these websites. So if we go to Visual Studio here, I already go ahead and just to kind of save a little bit of time, I've created a very basic ASP.NET MVC page. So this is just basically file, new project, creating an ASP.NET MVC4 application. And let's go ahead and just change a little bit of this text just so we can kind of see something changing here in our demo. So say, welcome to Windows Azure Web Sites. Looks good there. So we save that. And let's go ahead and let's go about deploying this solution out there. So I'm going to go back to our management portal here with Windows Azure. Go to our new Web 1 dashboard. And here you can see some of the stuff we talked about, the dashboard and the monitoring that we have. We have our usage overview in here. We have our performance, kind of our metrics in here. And I can change these a little bit to say, show me, instead of 24 hours, show it for the last 6 hours. I go to the monitor tab. I can see some of this metrics in here. If I want to add more of them, I can click the add metrics option. Maybe I want to see, show me any 404s that are happening. I can click that as well. I'll take the page there and see that we haven't had any come in, which is good. I want to look at the configure tab. You can see information, and here we'll talk about more about some of this coming up as well, the different framework versions, diagnostics, that type of stuff. And here's where I could change the scale for my solution. So I have one, maybe I want to go over to 2 or 3 instances for this one. If I wanted to go to reserved, I could do that as well, just clicking on the reserved button. It's going to, basically what reserved is going to do is change your Windows Azure websites for your subscription to be instead of being shared, to all be reserved, and then I can pick what size I want for that. So we're going to go ahead and not do that. We'll just keep it at 1 instance for now for this sample. Let's go back to our dashboard here, and then here's how I can actually go ahead and deploy some solutions. So I want to go ahead and download my publishing profile. This is going to download a .publish settings file for me. So I'm going to go ahead and save this to my desktop. But you'll notice in here I have some other options as well. Maybe I want to do a TFS publishing, and this is going to allow me to use the Team Foundation service, a TFS preview. So if you have a TFS preview account or a Team Foundation service account, you can go ahead and create that, get that set up for you. If you're using Git, I can go ahead and say, click the Set Up Git Publishing, which will actually walk you through setting up a Git repo that you can actually use to publish your website to and deploy that to Windows Azure Web Sites. So I'll go ahead and download this publish settings file. So we'll go back to Visual Studio here, and we'll just simply right-click on my project, and we'll say Publish. Now I want to go ahead and import that publish settings file. So go back to my desktop here. You can see we should have my new Web 1 Azure Web Sites publishing file. And then that's pulled in all the information I need to know about my website. So showing me the URL, the site name, password. I maybe test that connection there just to make sure that that works. It did. And if I wanted to deploy via FTP, I could do that as well. You can see all the information gets kind of published in here. We'll go ahead and do next. Say which build configuration do I want, debug or release. Let's go ahead and click finish or publish on this. And you can see in here we're going ahead publishing our package out to that URL for our website. So it's going to take a minute here to go ahead and publish that. So that should have been published, I believe, already. We'll go ahead and refresh our page here. Give that just a second to spin up. There we go, starting to come up. And we see that now newweb1.azurewebsites.net is our page that we just published. It says, welcome to Windows Azure Web Sites, quickly changing that solution out. If I wanted, I could use WebDeploy, like I said, I could use FTP, Team Foundation Service, or Git to really make these deployments however I want to do that. So I have a lot of choice on how I want to deploy my solutions out to Windows Azure. So how does all this kind of work and be put together? And there's a really good presentation at TechEd North America earlier this year, a couple months ago, called Windows Azure Web Sites Under the Hood. If you want to get deeper on Windows Azure Web Sites, the Windows Azure product team did a really great presentation at TechEd. I highly encourage you to go out to Channel 9, go to the TechEd North America section, and watch this video, download the PowerPoint slides that go along with it. They have a really nice presentation. But I think this graphic here, as part of that presentation, really does a good job of showing how Windows Azure Web Sites works. You start off with the basic Windows Azure load balancer, the front-end load balancer, so all your requests are automatically load balanced. That request comes into an application request routing module that they have in Windows Azure, and then a couple interesting things happen here. One of the choices it makes is it looks to see if your Windows Azure website is a hot or cold site. So what Windows Azure will do is, if your site hasn't been used for a while, it'll basically take it down. It will kind of make it a dormant website to free up some resources internally on the servers that power Windows Azure websites. If your site's constantly being used, then your website stays hot, so to speak, and it's always there and available. When your first request comes in, the application request routing module there looks to see, is that a cold or a hot website? If it's a hot website, it just goes ahead and reroute and routes the request onto the appropriate web server. If it's a cold website, it can look in that runtime database that Windows Azure Web Sites has, figure out all kinds of metadata about your site, like where your storage lives, what the URL is supposed to be, what files you need to have for that website, and then go ahead and provisions your website on a server. So for the first request for a cold website, you can see it could take maybe a second or so for that process to happen to get going. Once that's done, then you have this Windows Azure worker roles here. They're actually powering the websites. An interesting piece to how Windows Azure websites work is it's actually just a series of Windows Azure worker roles that they've automatically provisioned. That's one of the reasons and one of the ways that they're able to have sites up and running so quickly, a matter of seconds rather than minutes, like a traditional web role maybe, because the Windows Azure worker roles are already up and running, ready to go, and they just have been some Windows Azure website code has been deployed to them, like W3 WP process that people are familiar with. There is some custom metering logic in there to help enforce quotas and other features of the platform, and a new kind of customized version of a dynamic web activation service sitting on these servers. So if they need to provision more servers throughout the Windows Azure websites, maybe preview period that people are using it a lot, they can quickly spin up new Windows Azure Windows Azure worker roles to provision these sites for Windows Azure websites. So it's kind of an interesting way of Windows Azure websites really building upon the features that the platform has as Windows Azure, taking advantage of the worker roles in the platform. There's also an API available for Windows Azure websites, although it's not very well documented, or if at all documented, but there's a public API for that. So I think that'll be one of those things that as websites moves to GA, then they'll actually kind of expose a little more documentation on that. There's some databases behind the scenes as well for your servers, so like a SQL database or a My SQL via ClearDB. And you also have a storage controller. This is one, I think, of the really interesting pieces to websites is how the storage controller actually helps you with your Windows Azure applications. So if I take an example of a website where I have maybe Log4net, for example, writing some log files, a pretty common scenario, writing to maybe a logs directory, some relative directory on my website. I don't have to change any of that code, that logging code, to move this application to Windows Azure websites. It'll just work. I don't have to pay attention. I don't have to know about how the file system is working. I know that I have storage space on my website that I can work with just like normal. If I just want to write to that file system, I can write to that just going to the relative path on my website. That's all backed by Windows Azure blob storage behind the scenes. But I don't have to know that because the storage controller and everything with Windows Azure websites is really abstracting and protecting me from having to deal with maybe the complexities that I may have to deal with blob storage if I want to do a Windows Azure web role, for example. So it's a little bit easier model to work with. When I have that website, I can certainly go ahead and just write to that file system and it all gets saved for me. So that's a really nice feature of the platform, I think. We talked about configuration, kind of showed a little bit of the configuration originally. We walked through the portal. So you can change the .NET Framework version or PHP, so I can kind of choose which version I have there. If I'm working with reserved modes, then I can pick my host name, get that host name in there, set up, and as we saw earlier, they'll probably add that feature for hostname support to the shared instances sometime when Windows Azure Websites goes into GA. There are a couple of really good and I think important MSDN articles and one on the MSDN forums for Windows Azure Websites talking about diagnostics. They're pretty lengthy, so I didn't want to put them in here. I just wanted to give you the links so you could follow up on your own on this information. The first one here is one on some important limitations to how Windows Azure log files work. They don't persist forever. There is kind of a deletion period with them. And also you have to manually do some manual cleanup on them as well in order to kind of continue IIS logs to have that continue to be writing to the system. So I encourage you to check that out and really understand how the logging works and the limitations that it has and the feature that brings with it as well. And if you want to get into how you monitor this website, so now I've got ahead and deploy this solution. I have some logging out there. I understand how the logging works. I need to understand how to monitor my website, monitoring, do I need to scale the solution? Maybe I need to go to reserved instances. There's a really nice MSDN article that kind of talks about those monitoring details so you can figure out, maybe kind of getting in some information about how your website is performing. So I definitely encourage you to check that out as well and understand how the monitoring solutions work with the websites. You can also set up custom application settings with Windows Azure Websites. So you're probably familiar with working with a web config file, and I put my app settings in there, and I just kind of read that into my .NET code. With the app settings with Windows Azure Websites, I can still use that, but I also have a place in the portal where I can go in and add in application settings there without having to really modify that web.config file. So what happens behind the scenes is that application settings are there that I set in the portal. And I also have those in my web config file. They essentially get merged together. So when I call configuration manager.app settings to pull in that app settings, I get kind of I get both of those that I can return back. So it gives me kind of a nice option. If I don't want to have to deploy my web.config to change the setting, I have a very easy way to do that. Same goes for the connection strings. I have the connection strings that I can manage right from the portal, so I don't have to update my web.config file to change things that may frequently change but are so based off configuration. And then I can control the default documents for my website as well. The default kind of black starter page that you saw is a default document. It's the last default document in the list. But if I want to have mic.htm be the default document, I could certainly add that to the configuration section in there as well. So this is very similar to how you would work with default documents in IIS. It's giving you a really nice, easy to use interface in the Windows Azure Website Management Portal to go ahead and do that. Also, one of the nice things about the websites here is Microsoft's community support, really bringing in additional popular community applications and make them very easy to run in Windows Azure websites. A lot of people want to set up blogging engines like WordPress or DOSBlog, or they want to work with CMS systems like Orchard or Umbraco. And they want to set those up very easily. It's a popular request to do that on Windows Azure. And you can certainly set these up on Windows Azure using the web roles, but there's a few more things you have to get going, kind of manual steps that you have to work with there to get that to happen. What Microsoft's looking for with these community apps, the partners here, is make it very easy for you to go in and pick a CMS system or e-commerce site or a blogging engine, whatever you need to do there. Go ahead, pick that application of choice and deploy that out to Windows Azure, and they kind of handle all that for you. So they work with their partners like WordPress and Umbraco to make sure they have a really nice, easy experience for you to go ahead and create that solution and run it on Windows Azure websites. So let's go ahead and see an example of setting up a new WordPress site on Windows Azure, just to show the kind of process the gallery goes through. So go back over to our website section here. And I'm going to go down to the application bar here on our new, and we're going to do a new website, create it from gallery. And you can see in here where I have multiple different options for e-commerce applications, CMS type of sites as well, and some blogs. We're going to go to blogs, and we're going to say a WordPress site. Do next on this. And I need to give it a name. Let's call it new blog demo 1. And I am going to go ahead and say create a new database, and we're going to put this in the appropriate subscription there. So we know that this URL is available. So at newblogdemo1.azurewebsites.net. Go ahead and click next on that. And it gives you the kind of default name for your My SQL database. So I'll go ahead and leave that as it is. And then I'm going to click the I agree to terms down here. So this is using ClearDB as the partner to set up My SQL. Go ahead and click next, or the checkbox to complete that. That's going to take a couple of seconds, probably less than a minute here to get that up and running, creating this new, getting WordPress set up for us. When that's done, we'll be able to go ahead and go to newblogdemo1.azurewebsites.net and then complete the process for setting up a WordPress site. The normal WordPress configuration, kind of quick start that you have there with WordPress is ready to go for us very easily within Windows Azure Websites as well. So we got that already created. So go ahead and click the link here to go to new blog demo 1. And you can see here, this is the the quick WordPress install. So I pick out my name that I want, the site name, username, all the normal stuff I would have with WordPress to get up and going, and then I can have this site. So pretty easy there to get that done as well. So as we kind of wrap up here towards the getting a little closer, I want to make sure we understand that there's a lot of different frameworks that I could work with on Windows Azure Websites. If I want to run a classic ASP site, I could certainly go ahead and do that, just uploading those files to Windows Azure Websites, kind of really not having to make any changes along the way. Certainly an ASP.NET site, as we saw in our demo, works really well as well. If I want to do a PHP application, like WordPress, very easy to get set up. And there I can do PHP sites. And Node.js is also kind of that popular one that a lot of people are interested in today. Node.js works equally as well with Windows Azure Web Sites. If I want to deploy or publish my solution out to Windows Azure Web Sites, I can do so via FTP. Very easy to get going with that. We can also do so with WebDeploy, as we saw in the second demo today. Using Git gives me a nice option as well, where I could go out there and do setting up that Git repo, maybe working with GitHub to go ahead and have that continuous deployment model. And Team Foundation Service, picking out, once I have my Team Foundation Service account already created, when I go ahead and check into Team Foundation Service, it'll go ahead, build out my solution for me, pushing that out to Windows Azure Web Sites, making it a very easy option to get going. So really depending on, I have lots of choices for languages that I want to work with, as well as how I want to go ahead and deploy my solution. Give me a great deal of flexibility in what I want to do with Windows Azure Web Sites. So there's a lot of really great characteristics, I think, and traits of the websites. It's an easy way to go ahead and get started. I'm kind of creating those modern applications. I can go ahead with 10 websites for free for the first 12 months, which gives me a great way to get started with a solution. I can quit. I think the nice thing about websites that people find really attractive is how fast and easy it is to go ahead and get started. It's a matter of seconds. As much as I love Windows Azure web roles, there is a kind of a little bit of a ramp up period to get started with them as far as the coding you have to do to work with Platform as a Service to really take advantage of the great strengths that the platform has to offer, but also just building up that website, getting it provisioned for that first time. It could take a few minutes to provision that server. This gets you the ability to do that very easily in just a couple of seconds, as we saw. If I want to go ahead and scale out or up, I can do that, going from multiple instances of a shared site to larger instances and more of them in reserved instances. And all my requests are automatically load balanced for me, so I don't have to manage any of that infrastructure. The platform handles that load balancing and that shared data storage. When I write to that file system across multiple instances, I have that available across all my instances. I don't have to do anything special there. That all gets handled automatically for me, making it really nice and easy for me to scale my solution without really having to do any really extra work, which is a fantastic way to get started. I have lots of different frameworks that I can work with. A lot of the popular open source frameworks for like blogging engines are available. I can work with tooling that I want, whether it be Visual Studio or WebMatrix. On the Microsoft side, I can work with multiple different languages, .NET, PHP, Node.js. If I want to go ahead and use different databases, I have a SQL database that I can certainly go ahead and connect to. Very easy to get set up as well. Or My SQL if I want to do maybe a PHP app like we saw with the WordPress example. Very easy to go ahead and get started with that as well and have that kind of My SQL as a service, so to speak. I have development tools on Windows, but I can also do it on Linux and OS X as well, giving you that really your choice. However I want to do it, I have options now with Windows Azure Web Sites to make it very easy for me to go ahead and develop that solution. I can go ahead and do this very quickly as well. Updates happen in seconds. So instead of having to build up a new package file like I would with a web role and deploy that and wait for that update process to happen, this is, I simply, for all intents and purposes, right, just copy out that deployment, whether that's via an FTP or TFS or Git or WebDeploy. However I want to go ahead and deploy that new code, that update just really is dropped on that file system. It happens in seconds. I have options to do that continuous deployment, which a lot of people like to do via Git and Team Foundation Service. That stuff is very nicely done and very easy to set up as well. As you saw looking at the new management portal, I have that real-time usage statistics that I can look at, seeing how many requests have come in for the last maybe 24 hours or 6 hours, and seeing what are the 404 errors that I get. Did I get some 404s? And if I did get those, I can see those in that portal, and maybe it's going to trigger me to go ahead and log in and download the log files. So maybe I could pull down the IIS logs or the failed request logs to see what's generating these 404 errors. Why am I getting these on my site? And then I can go ahead and update them very quickly using whatever deployment mechanisms that I feel are good for my solution. So I want to learn more about the new Windows Azure. There's some great resources I want to put in here just to give you some links to go ahead and follow up on. Obviously, you can go to meetwindowsazure.com. There's some Chalk Talk videos out there. And the idea behind these Chalk Talk videos is to really show you just some of the basics of Windows Azure Web Sites and really all the new features in Windows Azure. They're a couple of minutes long. Very easy to get going on those. Of course, the Windows Azure Developer Center at windowsazure.com. Some great tutorials on there, picking out your language of choice, whether it's Node.js, PHP, .NET. I can go out there and get their necessary tooling, sign up for a trial, download the SDKs, training kits, all that stuff is there as well. Oh, and I talked about that at the beginning, kind of Tech Ed, some of the videos that they had there. Definitely go out to Channel 9 and go to the events and then Tech Ed North America section, where you can see really all the really deep dive videos on Windows Azure and especially Windows Azure Web Sites. That was the focus for today's webcast. They have a lot of videos out there really going into much more detail about this type of stuff from a lot of the product team at Microsoft. And across the country, Microsoft is doing these Windows Azure dev camps. So you can go to devcamps.ms/Windows Azure. So like there's a Windows Azure dev camps all across the country. There are web camps and so forth. So they're slowly ramping out and rolling those out. So definitely find one in a city near you and spend some time learning about the new Windows Azure. And of course, Neudesic, we have a series of webcasts coming up as well over the next several months on Windows Azure Virtual Machines and Windows Azure Cloud Services as well. So you can go ahead out to neudesic.com to register for those. So as we kind of wrap up here, I want to thank you guys for your time. Is there any questions we can talk about with Windows Azure websites or anything on Windows Azure, I guess, overall?
Great. Thank you, Michael, for this awesome presentation. We did have a few questions come through. As a reminder, to ask a question, please click on the Q&A verbiage located in the toolbar at the top left side of your screen, type your question, and then click the Ask button. So the one question I got was, how do you define a site? Is it per domain or a subsite within a domain?
A website would be really kind of it's everything hanging off of azurewebsites.net. So I'd have michaelcollier.azurewebsites.net, new blog demo.azurewebsites.net. That's a site, so a subdomain off of azurewebsites.net. That is your website. Hopefully that answered that question. It's really, I pick an application and I deploy that and I just have a domain name that I work with there.
Great, thank you. If anyone has any more questions, please feel free to type them in at this time. In the meantime, I'm going to click through a few polling questions and we'd greatly appreciate your feedback. The first question, was this content helpful for your business, yes or no? Great, thank you. The next question, please rate the presentation content, excellent, good, or poor. Great, the next question is, would you like us to schedule a follow-up with you, yes or no? All right, Michael, and I did get another question that came through during that poll. Could you go through how to set up is it GIT or Git deploy?
A Git deploy. Let's see if I can get some of that information up here on the screen for you and just kind of show a little bit of that. Strong point there. So set up Git publishing. So I'm not a big Git user. I need to kind of set up a username and password here that I would work with. I'm supposed to say mcollier and then give it a password here. So I'll set up those deployment credentials. Now you'll see it's going ahead and creating the Git repository for me. And we did have an error, of course. I might be behind a firewall where I'm at that might not let me go ahead and do some of that for me. But the wizard really should walk you through kind of setting that up, setting up your credentials, and using Git. It looks like I'm going to be behind a firewall here that's going to prevent me from setting up some of that information. I think I can get back into that. There we go. So you have a little bit of information here where it kind of refreshes and kind of shows me what is my Git URL that we had to work with. I need to go ahead and Git download that, how I would commit those files, and then go ahead and finally saying Git push Azure master. to go ahead and do that. So the nice thing is that Windows Azure provides you that kind of walkthrough on how you go about doing that as well. So it kind of gives you a quick start with that. And if you use Git a lot, are familiar with that, and obviously you can add in your own special stuff as well. So hopefully that helped that question.
All right. Another question that did come through is, do we create our accounts at windowsazure.com?
Yes. So if you're not, I'm assuming this is how we go ahead and get started signing up for Windows Azure. And yes, I could go out to windowsazure.com. It helps if I spell it right. windowsazure.com, and if I don't already have an account, I can go to the free trial section and click on try it free, and from there I will get a free trial, sign in with a Windows Live ID, creating my account. I'll need a credit card to sign up, and the credit card is not, so you're not going to get charged on that. You're guaranteed a zero billing for that. The credit card is really to prove that you're a human being, because they don't want to have fraudulent people using the service. So this gives you the purpose that it sets up prove that you're a legitimate person, and gives you the ability at some point, if you would like to continue using the service, to easily transition you into a paid model to use it. Like maybe I want to go from shared websites to reserved because I like some of those features that reserved has. I could easily transition over there, and billing will be set up accordingly as well. So yeah, very easy to set up. Once you have that, then it's just a matter of going into the account section for your site or for your subscription, and then clicking on the preview features link there to go ahead and activate Windows Azure Web Sites, Windows Azure Virtual Machines, or Windows Azure Media Services.
All right, perfect. If anyone has any more questions, you can go ahead and type them in at this time. And I just have one more poll question for you, and then we'll wrap it up. How did you hear about this webcast? Just curious if it was our website, email, Facebook, Twitter blog, or other. And we will be forwarding a link to view a recording of this webcast once it does become available. Again, thank you so much for everyone for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on our next webcast. If there's no more questions, you are free to disconnect. Thank you.